Is all fair in love and war?
Safety. Talk with me. We got to find the president. All teams secure the sectors.
Ever since the 1990s, we have seen a lot of war simulator games developed and released to various entertainment systems. Some of these games enact real-world events such as the Medal of Honor series, where its first few games focus on the reenactment of the First and Second World War, and of course the Call of Duty games that follow their own stories for most of the franchise's entries. These games are made to put you into the shoes of a soldier fighting in the front lines like the first Call of Duty games and Medal of Honor games as mentioned earlier, or the main character of a story that could prevent a Third World War like Call of Duty Black Ops or the franchise's Modern Warfare trilogy. The developers of these games have obviously put some twists to their games that are based on real-life events, while the fictitious ones will always give you a dilemma of some sorts to further give the game more tension and depth. One of the more heart-gripping war simulator games out there is Spec Ops: The Line, where it questions your moral compass and puts you right on the spot with the dilemmas that it throws at you throughout the game. It has horrendous gameplay and I had to make myself play it 5 times from the very beginning in different intervals just to play the entirety of it all the way through. But underneath that is a really fantastic piece of narrative that shows the true horrors that soldiers need to face and shows how they are the most psychologically vulnerable. However, all these games portray the psychological side of soldiers or people that are, in one way or another, involved in the military. They are fantastic in their own way and differ from each other, but we never get to see the war's aftermath, how it affects normal people that are indirectly caught up in it. That's exactly what the game that was released in 2014 did. This game puts a really huge twist on your usual war simulator games and creates this atmospheric, narrative-driven survival experience that will question your morals and to what extent you are willing to sacrifice to survive in a war-stricken country. A dark, grim world where doing what you think is right might become another day to wake up to or ultimately your demise. Today we're going to talk about this war of mine. This war of mine puts you in the shoes of not war-hardened soldiers but rather normal civilians who lost their homes and even families due to the war and have to scrape by just to survive a day. The group of civilians that you control finds a rundown house as their temporary shelter as one of them prepares to hunt for supplies in the night. It's a chilling anthology of tales from various groups of people and it's up to you how they will fare in this ruined city. The developers 11-bit Studios made sure to capture the gripping experience that war can do to normal civilians. Your task in this game is to make sure that your survivors have enough basic necessities to make it through the day. That includes food and water and medicine for those that are and will get sick. Dying of starvation or not curing illnesses is of utmost importance to avoid, but getting raided by bandits is also a concern to look out for. You don't get to do anything about the raids and it's up to the people left behind in the shelter that you task to defend your belongings to do their best into stopping these raids. The only thing that you can do to influence the outcome is to scavenge for weapons or make them yourselves and to make sure that your windows and doors are all barricaded. Meanwhile, the person you chose to gather supplies isn't in the safest conditions as well. They explore places ranging from decrepit burning down houses to alleyways guarded by snipers or houses of those people not affected by the city's besiegement. Methodical exploration of these places will be an important aspect of the game and will surely tug at your moral compass. The game functions like a typical point-and-click adventure as you would mostly use your mouse to move around and command the civilians that you control. The game uses a time system for progression, so being decisive is a key point when playing the game. The game is as long as you make it out to be. Playing through all the game's content can both be shorter or longer depending on how you play the game and your luck. But the fact that the game has a bit of a learning curve when it comes to its mechanics, it will take you quite some time to get accustomed to it before you can feel comfortable playing the game. To end this summary, I would just like to say that I really highly recommend the game. It is a very unique take on the war simulator genre and is truly immersive especially when it comes to the game's story. Even if you are not a fan of point-and-click gameplay, the story alone will make this game worth your money. However, you won't find this game very fun if you're the type of person that's more into action and don't bother reading text and dialogues in games, or apathetic towards video game characters or the game's story. This game is heavily full of interactions with other characters, and I can guarantee you that it will put you to sleep if you're not into that sort of thing. The game can be extremely confusing and difficult for new players, so be prepared for some trial and error or constantly looking up guides in YouTube. If that was enough to sell you the game, then you can go down to the description for the link to the game's Steam store page. And if you want to know more about the game, then stay for a little longer as we dive deeper. The game is full of depressing undertones and atmosphere to cater more to its immersion. Everything in this game is mostly in monochromatic scale, or at least has a monochrome filter. Character portraits and their game models are pretty realistic, and their animation feels really smooth. Most of the objects in the game are really small to be seen up close, but they are pretty well made as well. Items that you can find while scavenging the various areas of the game are drawn in your inventory through minimalistic style. They are done this way since most items in the game only have one general use, and it wouldn't make sense for the developers to make multiple other types of an item. The layouts of the areas that you will be visiting can sometimes feel very video gamey, but they will make sense in a lore perspective. While some areas are blocked off and can only be unlocked from the other side to force you to explore the whole area first, there's still a logical reason behind it. Most of the barricaded doors are barricaded on the other side to prevent looters from coming in, aka people like us, the players. The looks of establishments also change over time. When you first enter the old cottage, for example, most of the surrounding areas are still on fire, likely due to the shelling that was done. However, the fire will disappear after subsequent visits to the place, giving you a sense of time that the world doesn't really revolve around you and that it continues to move on. The sound design is just absolutely perfect for every area. Abandoned buildings are quiet with a subtle ominous ambient noise, burning houses cackles as its foundations start to be chipped away by the fire, and establishments guarded by snipers will literally be rained down by sniper bullets from afar, and it makes a dreaded echoing sound each time the snipers take a shot and their bullets hit the ground or the cover where you're on. Not to mention that the game also has a wonderful music score to further add to the tension, thrill, and loneliness of the game. As with all wonderful game soundtracks out there, the title for each track fits perfectly well for where they are used in the game. Let's listen to the music that you will mostly hear when you're in the shelter. It's a very calming, lonely music that fits perfectly well when you're in your shelter, either resting or barricading yourselves inside, or planning out the next course of action. The title pretty much says it all. And we should not forget the chilling music over your scavenging hunt. It's an eerie piece of track that constantly reminds us that everyone else in the city is trying to survive on their own terms, whether that aligns with your ways of surviving or not. And there are a lot of other soundtracks in the game that will let you feel all kinds of emotions. The game requires not that much of a hardware to run. Its recommended requirements in the game's Steam store page is a GTX 260 graphics card, a fairly outdated graphics card in today's standard, 4GB of RAM, and a dual-core processor. Almost anyone with a computer bought within the last decade can pretty much run this game. This wharf mine is based on the poor living conditions and wartime atrocities that Bosnian civilians endured during the Siege of Sarajevo, the longest city siege since World War II that lasted nearly 4 years between April of 1992 to February of 1996. A lot of casualties were counted during this event that after the ceasefire, the population of Sarajevo got reduced from 500,000 to 300,000, with more than tens of thousands of soldiers who lost their lives and more than 5,000 civilians killed. I am no expert when it comes to history, but I will try my best to summarize what happened based on what I have read and watched from the internet. The siege started when Bosnia and Herzegovina declared independence from Yugoslavia after the 1992 Bosnian independence referendum. The Bosnian Serbs, who wanted to make a new Bosnian Serb state instead of just separating from Yugoslavia, proceeded to boycott the aforementioned referendum and surrounded Sarajevo, the capital city of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Bosnian Serbs shelled the city using artillery, tanks, and foot soldiers. The siege itself was horrifying. Roads were blocked, cutting off food and supply routes which left the people inside the city trapped. Not only that, but even utilities such as electricity and water supplies were cut off as well, making living conditions inside the city hellish. Throughout the city, snipers were placed that killed people that would cross the borders. This prompted the widespread "Beware Snipers" signs in the city, and some places were even called sniper alleys because of how dangerous they had become and how many people fell victim to the snipers in those areas. Crime rate has significantly increased and looting took place not long after. It was reported that an average of 329 shells impacted the city every day, which extensively damaged the city structure, and virtually all the city's buildings and establishments have suffered damage. This also resulted in mass killings of hundreds of civilians. After a while, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO, intervened with the siege and tremendously helped the Bosnian military force in fending off the Serbs. Because of this, and with the help of the Croatian forces, the Serbs were finally pushed away from Sarajevo and the surrounding areas, prompting the restoration of public utilities in the city. Ceasefire was declared in 1995, and in 1996, after almost 4 whole years since the siege started, the Bosnian government has finally declared the long-awaited end to the siege as the Serbs left their positions in and around the city. That was a really huge oversimplification of the event, but from what I can see, this war of mine perfectly portrayed this event perfectly well. Remember, in this war of mine, we are not playing as a soldier fighting in the front lines to stop the sieging or defend what's left of the city from foot soldiers of the Serbs. We are playing as the civilians trapped inside Sarajevo. People that are helpless and with little to no supplies left to survive to the next day. If you want to know more about the events that happened during the Siege of Sarajevo, I highly recommend this video from Clothmap. It's a great 11-minute documentary that tells the history of the siege and of the city of Sarajevo much better than I could ever hope to do. The link for the video will be in the description and on the upper right corner of the screen. The characters that you will play in the game are people that are trying to survive throughout the siege. They have their own backstory that gets revealed after a certain number of days have passed in the game, or certain events have been triggered, giving you more world building and introducing these characters more by telling you their occupation and what their lives were before the war. It's a collection of different people trying to live through another day until the ceasefire happens and peace finally returns back to the city. But until then, they have to scrape by with whatever they can to do so. This war of mine has a lot of gameplay elements that, in my opinion, is best to be lost in for your first playthrough. So for this section of this video, I will only be focusing on the more important parts of the gameplay and gloss over some of them. To start things off, this war of mine plays similarly to point-and-click adventure games set in a side-scrolling perspective. You click where you want your character to go, and you click on the button prompts on what you want your character to do with a certain object. Double-clicking will make your character run. You can change the character that you control by clicking their portraits in the bottom right corner of the screen or by clicking their models in the game. Of course, this only applies if you have different survivors with you or if you are inside your shelter. You start the game by choosing a set of survivors to play as, each set containing different survivors with different sets of skills. As with other survival games, these characters have different needs to be satisfied or else they would die or leave your shelter. To briefly discuss it, each survivor has different character states, namely mood, hunger, illness, wounded, tiredness, and sleep. Each of them are pretty self-explanatory, and failing to tend to these states will have direct consequences to your character's survivability. You are immediately thrown into the game right after selecting your set of survivors, and your first order of business should be to clean your shelter. Search through all the doors, cabinets, and rubbles that you can find for hints of food and valuable supplies that you can use. Use the supplies to procure beds and other necessities, as well as workbenches to make yourselves useful tools and weapons, and prepare for your first night of scavenging. But do it fast, because time is not on your side. Time is one of the most important aspects of the game, as you need to squeeze in all the activities and preparations you need to do within a certain time frame. Daytime in the game occurs within 14 hours from 6 AM to 8 PM. During this time, you can do whatever you need to do in your shelter. You can craft more tools and equipment to further accommodate your survivors, maybe cook some food if they are feeling famished. You can also talk to other survivors that will come to your shelter. These survivors are either people that are looking for help or are willing to trade with you. Everything that you craft in the game also requires time to complete. Obviously, they vary from item to item, but if you are going to make a survivor craft an item, they will be stuck for as long as the tool is required to be finished crafting. Most actions also require time as well, such as digging through rubbles, removing barricades from doors, cooking, and sleeping. Sleeping accommodates to 4 of the character states: wounded, illness, tiredness, and sleep, ranked down from the least affected by sleeping to the greatest. The slightly wounded and slightly sick survivors will recover over time when sleeping, but lethally wounded or terminally ill survivors need other items and treatments to get better. Meanwhile, tiredness and sleep statuses like drunk and hungover can be remedied by just going to sleep, regardless of how extreme they are. Your survivors only need 5 hours of sleep, so you can juggle 2 of them with just 1 bed during daytime, eliminating the need to craft 2 beds at the start of the game. You need to manage your time here as well as you can so that everything that you want done in the daytime is already done before night falls. Or if you have already done everything you need to do, you can just fast forward the day by clicking the end day button. Because once it's night, it's time to scavenge. You cannot survive with just the junk you find in your shelter alone. You need to survive for more days to come, and you need to procure supplies and equipment to further increase your chances of surviving. So you scavenge other areas. Scavenging begins after nightfall. After daytime ends, whether through natural progression or by skipping the day, you are presented with an action screen that lets you choose who will be go scavenging, who will be staying awake at night to guard the shelter, and who will go to sleep. As I've mentioned earlier in the video, bandits will raid your shelter from time to time, so having someone stay up to guard the shelter is a good way of preventing them from taking anything from you. The survivor you have chosen to scavenge can bring along tools to help with your scavenging trip. Be sure to bring all of the things that will help your survivor, as they only have limited amounts of inventory space. Once the spaces are filled, you won't be able to pick up other items anymore, forcing you to go back to the shelter and pick up the items you left in an area in the next night. These items that you can bring along range from crowbars to shovels to actual firearms that can help your survivor fend off assailants. However, combat in this game is really clunky and complicated, so I won't further discuss how it works. Anyways, aside from choosing who will do what, you also get to choose the area where you want to scavenge for supply set. For your first night, you will only be given one choice, but as nights pass by, more areas will be available to choose from, each having different kind of loots, and some of them even have NPCs that you can interact with, or NPCs that will kill you the moment they see you. There are also areas that are inhabited by people that haven't left their homes despite the siege. This is where the moral dilemma comes in. These houses will surely have so much supplies that you can get, but these people were already unaffected by the war. They are living in peace and managed to survive through sheer luck. Would you steal from them to get more food and increase your chances of survival, potentially killing the inhabitants of these houses? Or do you leave them alone, refusing to drag those fortunate enough to not get affected by the war to the messy state of the city by your own hands. At the end of the day, the choice is yours to make. But the game will never let you forget that you have stolen from and most probably have killed innocent people just to suit your needs. Your survivors will start to become depressed and will sometimes even take their own lives. Some will stop to do daily chores and some will really complain a lot, contemplating the actions that you have taken. This ties back into the thing that I've mentioned in the beginning of this video. If you are apathetic towards video game characters and don't care for the story and only here for the gameplay, or maybe you're just an edgy kid, then yes, you would absolutely steal from these people and maybe even kill them just for fun. You will only get annoyed by the constant whining that your survivors will make and will probably be happy if they kill themselves, as that's one less mouth to feed. As a person that likes to get immersed in the story and actually empathize with video game characters, I will never agree to that, but I can understand. In a gameplay perspective, it is the most logical, practical way of doing things. But if you're like me, this is a difficult choice to make. Going back to the sniper alleys I've mentioned in the story and character section of this video, the developers made sure to incorporate that in the game. Called the Sniper Junction, this places a sniper from far away constantly shooting where you are, forcing you to strategically make your way to where you can find loot. There are also places where you get to meet other scavengers. While they are not hostile to you when you meet them, provoking them may prompt them to attack you, putting your life in risk. Of course, you can retaliate, but the combat in this game is a bit clunky and complicated, just like I said earlier. These somewhat small choices already give you a strong dilemma. Do you fight with other scavengers just to get your own supplies, or do you rob rich people that have nothing to do with your current situation? The choice falls to no one but you. Scavenging begins at 9 PM and you have until 5 AM to get back to the shelter. Starting at 4:20 AM, your survivor will monologue, basically warning you to get back to the shelter before the sun rises, or in the game's terms, 5 AM. Failing to reach an exit before 5 AM will decrease the chance of the survivor to return to the shelter, potentially losing all the items that they might have looted during the night, and most importantly, losing a member of your group. A survival game is not complete without a crafting mechanic, and this war of mine definitely has it as well. It's not the most sophisticated crafting mechanic in the world, but it gets the job done by making sure that you need to get the supplies at a consistent rate if you want your survivors to survive. You start off with a simple workshop. Here's where you can find all the basic necessities for your survivors, including beds, stoves, and a rainwater collector. You can also build a metal workbench from this, which will allow you to craft various tools such as crowbars, which lets you open locked cabinets without the use of lockpicks, shovels, which lets you dig through rubble faster and can also be used as a weapon, as well as knives for a much stronger melee weapon that your survivors can use. The workshop and the metal workbench can both be upgraded to give you more things to craft that will significantly make your life and your survivors' lives so much easier, like an animal trap that can produce food every 4 days or so, a herbal plot which allows you to plant herbs to indefinitely produce herbal medicine and coffee beans, a saw blade which lets you cut off metal bars during scavenging sessions for more loot, the ability to board up windows of your shelter to further detriment raiders in looting you, and so much more. As I've mentioned earlier, crafting takes up time and varies from item to item. You can make 2 survivors craft on separate benches while another one cooks food on the stove. However, you can't let 2 survivors do the same thing. There's nothing much else to say here, the crafting is as simple as that. The game ends once you reach the day of the ceasefire. The amount of days you need to survive to reach this vary from playthrough to playthrough. The game also offers different endings depending on what you did throughout the game, which adds more replay value. Overall, the gameplay is a fantastic combination of suspense, dread, loneliness, and excitement. It's always a suspenseful time when you're running out of supplies in the daytime. Meanwhile, scavenging in dangerous areas will surely fill you with dread, and the decisions and things that you can or cannot do will surely make you feel sad for the characters. However, every time you get back to your shelter with all the supplies you got, or helping other survivors, will surely give you the surge of excitement. And all of those just blend in really, really well. As with all games, this war of mine poses some problems of its own. Firstly, the game is quite complicated and can turn away a lot of new players that can't be bothered to learn the ropes. I have to admit, I was one of those players. But after all these years of owning the game, I finally decided to look up some guides on how to play the game, and eventually learning that the game is based on real-life events, I decided to finally make a review out of it. Anyways, the game has a really steep learning curve and it will take you multiple tries to finally finish even one scenario or one set of survivors. The game can become quite boring to players that only want to play the game for the sake of playing it. No care for the consequences of their actions or getting immersed in the game's atmosphere. Or if they are edgy kids that will inevitably complain about how their survivors get depressed by killing old, innocent people to get their supplies. The survivors don't automatically do something when they are not selected. They just kind of stand there or seek the nearest chair to sit on. While there really isn't that much stuff to do in the shelter, I wish the game included some tasks that you can assign to other survivors that they will automatically do when on standby, like replacing the water filter for the rainwater collector or replacing the bait in your animal trap, stuff like that. I hate how they just stand there and stare in a blank wall. I have glossed over combat in the gameplay section, but it is also one of the game's weaker points, especially when it comes to melee combat. Fighting with a firearm is pretty straightforward, it's just like Fallout's VATS, so expect some percentage-based accuracy. However, when it comes to melee combat, it's basically RNG as it's up to your survivor's AI when it's going to attack or not. It's really clunky, and that's the reason why I didn't cover this feature in the gameplay section. Aside from the fact that it's not really the game's main point. The game can become quite the DLC sinkhole as well. As of writing the script, there are 5 DLCs for the game, each adding new sets of survivors for you to play as, but ultimately doesn't seem to add anything else, aside from the last broadcast DLC where it comes with a new tool. Other than those, the game is a quality masterpiece. This War of Mine is a true hidden gem that got obscured by the other games that were released alongside it back in 2014. Instead of making you a soldier that fights in the front lines or a protagonist that's there to save the world, this War of Mine shows you the true gripping horrors of war from the perspective of those that live in its wake, and the difficulty of surviving through a war-stricken country where you are left with the choice of scavenging leftovers, fighting for your life to get precious food, or giving in to your desperation, robbing people and potentially killing them in the process. A game that ultimately puts the question to the test. The question of is all fair in love and war?